What do you mean by taking away masks?
So masks, if anyone is a Carl Jung fan, masks are the things that we project or pretend to be to satisfy what we believe to be an external need or desire. So so in other words, when you're being your authentic self, you're typically in a more relaxed state, you're calm, you are in a position where you're responding naturally. When you start to put on masks is when you want to put up some type of defense or put on some type of external view so that people see you in a way that isn't truly about you.
Welcome to Onward Live, a live stream focused on encouraging you to create a life you love living now. Let's go beyond success to significance. Being clear on our why is crucial. It requires doing the inner work, finding ourselves, getting to know ourselves, embracing our inner child, shedding social conditioning, and letting go of perfect. We know obstacles make us stronger. We can dream big and take action. Believe you can, and you're halfway there. I invite you to tune in every week and engage with me and my inspiring guests. Invite your friends. Let's make time for what matters most in our lives. Let's move onward together.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining tonight. I'm excited to be here. I hope that you are too. And I'm Emily. I'm the host of this live show. So I'm excited to have Brian Clate here. He's a coach. And can you believe that I never really say what episode number this is? This is the 186th interview that I've done. 186. So I'm going to celebrate when we hit 200. Brian, welcome.
Hi, Emily. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing great. We were just talking earlier that, you're a coach. You've had a lot more training than I have, but we both went to the IPEC, Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching. And, it's fun to have a fellow coach on here to talk to tonight.
Oh, I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. So we're going to be talking about personal alignment and what's possible when you tear away the masks. And this is definitely, you signed up to be on this show back when I had a little bit of a different theme, which was facing adversity, moving forward, and discovering ourselves along the way. However, with creating a life you love living, personal alignment and tearing away the masks is a key aspect of that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's part of what allows you to identifying what it is that you really want to be doing and then determine how to start doing it. Yes.
Yeah. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Share your story with us. I want to hear it. And while you do that, I'm going to feature you right here.
Okay. So a little bit about myself. I'm a person who was born and raised, in the 70s and 80s. So I'm an 80s child, which sets a lot up for how it is that I entered the work world. I'm a former corporate executive. From the time I graduated college to before I became a coach, I rose through the corporate ranks, and became, what I thought was my dream, what I thought was success, what I was striving for from the minute I graduated high school, and then moved on to leaving that world because the world that really stopped becoming what it is that I wanted to do. It was actually causing me to become somebody I didn't want to be. And it was limiting me from being able to actually go out and make the difference that I was supposed to be making, here. So a little bit about me. I like heavy metal. I have 3 kids and still married to the same, wonderful person that I met when I was in college. I've lived in multiple states, and right now I'm in New England and in Connecticut.
Oh, wow. Aren't you getting ready for a big snowstorm this weekend?
Yeah, this is the great part about living in New England is we're going to get either an inch or 24 inches. They have no clue. It depends on where it comes off the coast. But yeah, we'll prepare for 24 inches and we'll probably get rain.
Oh, well, that would be disappointing. I don't know. Do you like snow?
Love it. That's why I'm here.
That's why you're there. So what was it about the corporate world that caused you to not be yourself or to start not liking who you were becoming?
Yeah. So I don't even know if I want to blame the corporate world, but what I found was that when I was in the corporate world and working for an organization, I had a drive to try to exceed expectations. So whatever the expectations were of the corporation, of me, of the role, I was finding myself driven to exceed them. And in doing so, what I wound up doing, probably midway through my career, is I really started hurting other people. It wasn't intentional. I wasn't out there plotting against them, but just by nature, if anyone's done a profile, personality profile assessment, one of those types of things, I'm typically going to show up in that director driver, quadrant, which means I can be very blind to things like emotions, hurting people's feelings and actually pushing people to the side, not giving people respect. It was a natural thing. And because I was good at what I did and was rewarded for what I did more of it.
Hmm.
And I did it to the point to where it became, while I was still very successful as an individual, and if you took any, objective measure, they were always, higher than what the organization was expecting. The personal toll was too big. And the biggest moment for me, what really made it click for me, was I had been living away from my family for 4 years. I had taken a job that was 2 states away, and in New England that's really only a 2.5 hour drive, but it was still 2 states away. And because I was 2 states away, I was spending the week away from them. And I'd come back on the weekends, and I thought it was fine, I thought it was working, up until the day that my 4-year-old daughter walked into the room on Monday morning knowing that I was leaving. And she broke down, started crying, telling me, asking me not to leave. And you know she'd only known me doing this for her whole life. From the time she was born to the time of that day, I had always been traveling. And I realized at that moment that not only was it something that needed to change from within the work, it needed to change within the family. And so I made the decision at that point that it was no longer for me.
Yeah, I would just say that I can definitely relate to that because I think, and I've learned a little bit about myself in this, that I tend to be hyperachiever, have a hyperachiever, mindset. And the more I've learned about that tendency, we also tend to feel that feelings are kind of get in the way of us achieving. That's what I've learned about me. And so that's very interesting that you noticed that and that you decided to make a change.
Yeah, the change was slow, I will admit, because the first change I made was not that I was going to leave the corporate world, but that I was going to leave the corporate world that I was in. I decided that being apart from the family was no longer something that was going to serve me. It wasn't going to serve the family, and it wasn't going to serve the companies that I worked for. Where I'd gotten a bit of a benefit was 3 years before leaving that organization, I had come into contact with a very, very good coach. He was an executive coach. He came in and he brought a program in that I went through along with 30 other executives at that company. And it was during this process where I actually started to become very fascinated with the concept of coaching, what it means to align yourself. So I learned with him how to align myself, how to start stripping away those masks and start to be able to see the what I would call the false life that I was living. Even though it looked successful, it was really a false life, and started moving more towards where it is that I am today. So I did get a benefit from it, but it was slow to take myself out of it. It wasn't like I just woke up and said I'm done.
Yeah,
Um, right?
no, I
It's not
get
an easy
that.
thing.
What do you mean by taking away masks?
So masks, if anyone is a Carl Jung fan, masks are the things that we project or pretend to be to satisfy what we believe to be an external need or desire. So in other words, when you're being your authentic self, you're typically in a more relaxed state. You're calm. You are in a position where you're responding naturally. When you start to put on masks is when you want to put up some type of defense or put on some type of external view so that people see you in a way that isn't truly about you. And more times than not, I think you mentioned at the beginning, it's the idea of starting to kind of protect yourself from insecurity so people don't see what's truly underneath or hear what's truly underneath because you don't think it's appropriate, you don't think it's proper, so you're being what you think other people want you to be as opposed to who you are.
And what in your experience, are people doing that kind of unconsciously sometimes, like not really aware that they're doing that?
So there's definitely a mix. And so when I talk with folks about removing masks, it's the unconscious masks, those who are just I'm sorry.
You help them discover those.
Yeah. So we typically we start developing them at a very early age. Very early age. We learn very quickly how we should behave when we're outside or when we're in a public place or when we're at school. We learn very quickly what's an acceptable behavior, what's not a behavior. For me growing up, I learned very quickly you didn't cry unless something was broken, right? And again, if there's children of the 80s, you've probably heard the phrase, from a parent, stop your crying or I'll give you something to cry about. It's one of those types of things where you start to learn that there's certain ways to act and certain ways not to act. And so you start to put on masks, you start to create this persona, and it isn't intentional. It is the subconscious that is putting these up in front. But the more you have on and the longer you keep them on, the harder it is to break away from it. And the more it becomes your natural reaction to things.
Yeah. I've got a grandson who's like 5.5, and I spent some time over the summer with him when he had just turned 5. And it's so awesome to see him because he doesn't have those masks. He's just innocent, sweet, natural. And it's like, that's how we all were at one point.
Well, it's so what I do is it's not at one point, it's we still are.
Yeah.
So my concept. So the concept is, and it was something that, again, the coach that I worked with helped me start to uncover, was it's still there. It's not gone. The dreams you had, the enthusiasm you had, the caring that you had, it's all still there and it's available to you. You just have to be willing to start removing the things that you thought was making you be successful and get back to that raw state, and then letting that be what you put out there, not just for yourself, but for others to engage with and interact, and very quickly find your paths.
So, I'm a coach, you're a coach, so full disclaimer, but let me just ask you, do you feel like that's something that people can do without the help of somebody else? Can they just do it on their own by like reading books, learning about themselves that way?
It's hard. I mean, can you? Absolutely. You never underestimate, a person's ability. I know I read the books, right? So I read all those books. I went to those seminars. I actually, like I said, I had a couple of coaches that tried to work on stuff with me, because when you're becoming aggressive in a corporate environment, it doesn't happen over time. And when people are looking to promote you to higher levels and they can see the things that would prevent it, they want to help you. But a lot of times it takes a very specific interaction to be able to help you be able to see and experience something. And when you remove the masks, it's not something you cognitively know.
Yeah.
It's something you experience. And so can you do it? Absolutely. Lots of people have done it, but it's one of those things where if you again, as you were growing up, if you were learning any type of sport, if you're learning any type of skill, you're going to school, there's someone there helping you along the way who's got experience with it. And that's where I see the benefit of, and that's why I went into coaching is to help those people that need just that little help of, how do I get there?
Yeah, definitely. Let's check out some of the chat here, because I think that there's a question or two. So Maria Thorpe, thank you for joining us. I appreciate you. Maria's an engineer where I used to work with the Navy. Don10 is saying, whoops. Okay, that's not showing up that great on here. So let me just read it. She's saying the 10, she's in Atlanta and she's taken the DISC, DISC,
Yep,
to
very
be
familiar.
corporate or not corporate? That's the question. Like, so do you have any recommendation for somebody who's trying to decide that?
So you have to be corporate or not to be corporate. You always have to ask yourself, either way, what is it you really want to do? And I'll give you an example. I know it's a very cliche statement, right? It's very easy to say. And when I was in corporate, the reason I stayed in corporate is I thought it was going to produce a certain income for me and my family. And I thought it was going to give me a certain lifestyle that I had set as a goal for myself when I was very young, when I was in my teens. And I thought corporate was the path. And so I was very happy early on in corporate. I was very happy to learn how to operate and navigate within a corporate environment. But when I realized that those were no longer the things that were satisfying me, I realized that you had to make a choice, because there's a purpose to corporate. I mean, a corporation exists in and of itself for itself and its shareholders. And if you can't align to that corporate purpose anymore, if you can't be part of that corporate mission, it gnaws away at you. You go home miserable, or even just feeling unfulfilled. That's when you start to look and say, well, maybe corporate isn't for me anymore, because I no longer have that feeling of fulfillment and satisfaction.
Yeah, and we all change. And, I think I've interviewed a guy, Roy Cook, on this show, and he talked about how a lot of us don't know what our values are. So when something's rubbing at you the wrong way, that's a good time to make sure you know what your values are, because you could be doing something that's against your values. Like you were working 2 states away. I mean, maybe it was 2.5 hours, but you were leaving your daughter. Your daughter was starting to, get upset about that. So that probably is something that made you think, what are my values towards my family?
So yeah, so I do value work, and I did listen to Roy before I'd come on, like earlier in the week, and his target of 10 to 20.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a lot.
there's a lot of values, and what I tend to work with folks on is that 99% of the time, when you have a reaction that, whether it's anger or frustration or something along those lines, it is that you just broke one of your values. It's not that someone else made you mad, it's that you have now gotten angry with yourself because one of your values have been broken. But more than having 10 to 20 values, I'm a person that tries to find the purpose. And usually when I talk with folks or engage with folks, it's really around, do you know what your purpose is? Because to me, that's much bigger than a personal value. That's why you're here,
That's
and
the
why
overarching, yes.
it is, and it's why you believe you're here, right?
Mhm.
And it's from that purpose that you start putting on or taking off all these masks, and it's how you interact with people. So a lot of times with the corporate world, you ask people, it's one of those things is, you ask people to introduce themselves, and usually they go straight from their name to their job,
Right,
because they believe their purpose is tied to what they do,
right.
right? My purpose is what I do here. Or and some people will call them, they're a mother or they're a father, because they believe that's part of why they're here. But when you start to strip it away and understand big picture wise, why are you here, you can now start to connect to people, not just directly in front of you, but well outside what you believe to be your normal range of influence.
Yep, definitely. Danten says mask used to cover up the real you. Yeah. And who else do we have here? Oh, we've got Elizabeth. Yeah, from Santiago, Chile. Thank you for joining us. Yeah, everybody, and Russ Hedge is here. So yeah, Russ Hedge talks about it's important to know what your values are, and he also talks about your purpose and what's your why. So he's like, stand strong in your values and your purpose. Yeah, and I think a lot of times, I mean, I know when I used to work for the Navy, we would do this strategic planning for the Navy, or you might do it for your company, and it's like, how often do we look at our own lives that way? Like
Yep.
strategically, and what's my purpose? What's my value? We look at that with the companies, what's the company's purpose? Why are we here as a Navy? But what about us?
Yep. So that's the concept of alignment. And when you align why you're here, and you can align that to the organization, it's much easier to stay corporate
Yes.
because you're aligned and it's working, and you do know who you are and you are aligned to it, and it fits, and it can fit for lots of people. But when it's not, and you'll know when it's not, because as I mentioned, you start to be somebody, you start to get feedback typically from an external group viewing you in a way that you don't view yourself. And a lot of times, if you're in a corporate world and you're wondering if you've got masks on, um, you'll start to hear people saying that you're making them feel certain ways, and that wasn't your true intention. So that's one of the great cues when you're in an environment, whether it be work or outside, is you're not living your to your purpose, to your values, when your intentions are being misconstrued and misunderstood.
That's a lot of what, I started to find in my last job. And, I retired at 56, which is my minimum retirement age from leaving the Navy. And because I was starting to feel that, I was starting to feel frustrated. I was starting to, the hyperachiever in me was, I knew that I wasn't probably focusing enough on like feelings and things like that. And I wanted to feel my feelings. You know what, though? I'm going to share that when I retired, I thought that I would all of a sudden, everything would fall into place, right? I'm retired. I have all this free time. Everything's going to be great. But it wasn't, because I still kept achieving, like, now I'm going to be a coach. Now I'm going to be a podcast host. And I created more and more work for myself. So, sometimes we think that it's the outside circumstances that have to change and then we'll change. And it's actually the other way around, at least in many ways, from what I've learned.
So that's definitely a focus, is that if you change yourself, you'll change those things that are around you. And the best example I can give, and I typically like to use myself as examples, is in 2017 is when I started to get an idea around trying to develop communities within the US. And at that point in time, I had started reading about things around these concepts of agricultural communities that are built, the homes are purpose built, the communities are purpose built to grow their own food, to not in like a
Mhm.
1960s commune style. I mean, you're still
Yeah.
part of the real world, but you start to bring it, it's you're bringing that stuff local. You're doing it for yourself, you're doing it for your community, and then you're doing it for your expanded community. And it was an idea that I had, not mine alone. I'd seen about it, and I was really interested in it, tried to work with it, tried to, I ran for public office because I figured if I got elected as a selectman, I could help the town do this, blah, blah, blah. What a great thing. And it never worked. And I couldn't figure out why, because I thought it was a wonderful idea. But rather than sit on it and chase it like I used to, right? I'll just keep changing my external stuff. I started to change, myself, and trying to figure out, why is this important to me? Why do I feel so tied to this, and what is this really about? Flash forward to 2021, middle of the year last year, June of last year. I was out in Las Vegas for an award ceremony, and there was a woman that came the last day. And this was there was a lot of doctors and medical professionals, and you know she stood out like a sore thumb because, as I've always joked with her, she looked like a bag lady had walked into this building. And you hadn't seen her up until this point. I mean, she, and they asked if anybody had any questions, and she started grilling these medical professionals, and everyone's looking at her because she wouldn't give up the mic. And I realized, I gotta go talk to her. I gotta find out who this person is. And so I walk over and I talk to the person, and we introduce ourselves. And she takes me to, she born and raised in Vegas. She's taking me all over the place within Vegas. We're talking about what her visions are. And I find out that, lo and behold, her vision of creating these types of communities is the same thing as my vision was in 2017. And now we're working together, raising funds, working with local governments to make these things happen, primarily for military and vets to start with. But we're already in conversations with, groups in 7 states to start bringing this. And so the reason why I give it as an example is I had to figure out why I wanted to bring this into existence within the US. Was it for selfish, egotistical needs? Was it because I wanted to be able to say it's my idea and it'll work? Or was it for something bigger? And when I acknowledged that it was for something bigger than that, it wasn't about me, it was about something more than that, is when the opportunity came and I was able to step into the opportunity. Even though it didn't look like the opportunity, I didn't know what it was. I stepped into it, and now it's coming to fruition.
That is an awesome story, because basically what you're saying is you stopped pushing for the thing to happen, and another thing is, and you kind of let it happen, and probably in between that time you did some work on yourself to, like you said, to understand why you really wanted it, and then the opportunity came.
Yeah. If I'm being completely transparent here, I almost died from the time I met her to when it started.
Is that
And
when you woke up and you couldn't use your left arm?
no, that was long before. No, that
All
was
right, well, wait,
that was
tell us
back.
about the almost dying part, and then we'll go back to this other story. Okay.
All right. So like a lot of people, I contracted COVID when I was in Las Vegas. And I came back like a lot of people, and I was mildly sick. And the mildly sick turned into something that was beyond mildly sick. If you listen to folks who have COVID, it can be very much like a cold, or you can go into full on, hallucinations, high fevers, 104, 105-degree temperatures. And so I had all of that. And then in the middle of the night, my breathing decided it no longer wanted to function.
Oh my gosh.
So,
Wow.
so I had gone from being stable but sick to within 3 hours, basically 3 to 4 hours away from no longer being able to function. Luckily we were monitoring my blood oxygen level at home. Anyone who's familiar with it, I had dropped from a 98 to a 79 in less than 2 hours,
Whoa.
and it was not coming back because I was measuring it every 15 minutes and I was watching it drop 5 points as we're going along. So got to the hospital. And when you're in the hospital, you get a lot of to yourself time. There weren't a lot of people, no one's allowed to come visit you when you have this disease, when you're in the hospital. The doctors can't even come in and visit you. Those that do come in to visit you, they look like they're from, the movie Outbreak, where they're fully head to cover many times in those plastic spacesuits. So you're really by yourself probably 23 hours of the day. And it was during that time where I had to start getting real with myself about why am I here? Because you have to ask yourself, is it worth going on anymore? And once you make the decision that it's worth going on, when you're given the choice, when it's sitting in front of you and you have that choice, it becomes more meaningful. And so, yes, there was definitely some personal work that had been going on throughout, from 2017 until that point, but it still wasn't satisfactory for me to be able to take that very next trusting last step that said, trust what you're doing, trust that it's real, and step into who you're supposed to be and make this happen.
Wow. What a story. Okay. So how can we get to that point without contracting COVID and without coming close to dying? How can we get to that?
So a lot of times it really depends. And so I will admit it's, for me, it's been more like a roller coaster. I get close to it and then I come back down, and I get close to it and I come back down. And I will say that it's like that, for a lot of the people that I work with or work for that I know personally, it's never a straight line.
Yeah.
It's never like a straight line. Once you get on it, you're consistently moving in that same direction. It's an up and a down. The way to do it without, the best ways to do it. And usually it does involve some type of, I'm going to call it a board in the face.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter what is, for me, it was my daughter had to tell me, in tears, please don't go. There were a number of those types of situations, but what I would say is don't ignore them. We usually ignore those things. From my perspective, I like to think that the reason I went through what I went through with COVID was because I had ignored all the opportunities beforehand to make it happen. I had talked myself out of it. I was focused on something else. And when I looked back, there was a lot of things I was focused on that was pulling me away from my alignment. And, if you keep doing that, something's going to come and hit you hard. So the best way that I would say to do it without contracting COVID and coming to a near state of death is be more aware, right? A lot of times in coaching, when we talk with people, we talk about awareness. It's not necessarily self-awareness. It's awareness of what's around you and the opportunities that are presenting, and perpetually ask yourself, why not this opportunity? Because the more you resist something, the more likely it is that's what you're supposed to be stepping to.
Yeah, get curious. What you just said reminds me too of an episode I did a long time ago with a woman named Lisa Spector. And Lisa's a Juilliard trained pianist. And she had little things that were happening that she was ignoring, right? Little things telling her. And finally, one day, something terrible happened. She fell and she broke her right hand, and she plays the piano for a living. So she broke her right hand in 7 places. It was bad. And for like 4 years, she played left hand, and she I don't know if she's published her book now, but it was called Left Hand Lemonade. And she's an awesome player. And she had a physical therapist that she fired because her physical therapist told her she'd never play again with her right hand, but she really worked a lot on her right hand. She plays with both, but she feels that's what made her realize that she doesn't play music with her hands. She plays with her heart.
Mhm.
And she started to find more opportunities for her to be able to help people play piano and stuff, even over the internet and things. So it's just another story of something like that happened, and you can find the gift in it. And it also wakes you up. She said it woke her up to realize she was ignoring some things in her about that. So yeah, it's the awareness. So I love that story, Brian. Thanks for sharing. And I'm so glad that you're here.
Me too.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to hear about your left arm, but let's check out the chat and see what we have here. Yes. Ligia from Costa Rica says, our values are the basis where we build life, the guide we follow during this journey. And let's see, I'm just looking, oh yeah. What? Your brain is all of us. I don't know what that means, Kara, but I enjoyed being on your show last night. Oh, someone's being silly. He said he was hit by a Teletubby. It's true. Well, maybe you were. Maybe it is true. I don't know, senor. Kara says, living in the present and seeing everything as it is in that moment is such a crucial skill to develop. Yes. And I have really only developed that over the past couple of years. And it really changed my life, because like before, I was just like, achieve, check things off my list, and I wasn't as aware. I knew it. And that's what I was saying, Brian. I thought that it would just all of a sudden come when I retired. I'd have all this time, but it didn't come. I had to work on myself. It wasn't the change of the external circumstances, like the free time. That was what made me realize, well, maybe it wasn't the job. Maybe it was me.
You weren't ready for free time yet.
No. And so it's just so interesting. And Kara says, my goodness, thank you for sharing. And I wanted to make a couple of other comments here. You know how you said that it's not a straight line. And that's why the onward, that E over the onward in my logo is like moving forward. And my son said, too bad life doesn't throw you for one loop like that. And it's kind of representing, it's blue and gold for Navy, and it's representing moving onward and like going from kind of blue to golden. It represents a lot of things. I love that logo. And then the other thing, Brian, I wanted to share is having that time to think. That's what I saw when I retired. I saw my former husband, my kid's dad, sick with cancer, and he had a lot of time to think. And he was paralyzed in both of his arms. And he didn't say a lot. And he passed away 5 months after his diagnosis, but I could tell he was thinking about how he had lived his life. And I could tell that he had regrets, and that changed me too. It was like, I want to live life fully and not have regrets, or at least know that I did my best to not have any regrets. And that's one of the reasons why this is Create a Life You Love Living Now, because it's not when circumstances change, but now what can you do? That's a little bit about about my story and why I've done this. And so I want to hear about how you woke up, or how you were not able to use your arm, and then how something all of a sudden happened where you were.
So this goes back into my corporate world, my corporate life. And so this goes back to 2009, where I was actually at the peak of my, corporate progress is what I would call it, success. And so in 2009, I was recently promoted, given a lot more responsibility, received, significant compensation, and I thought I was on top of the world. And I was working out, and I woke up the next morning, and my left arm decided it didn't want to work anymore. Like, it wouldn't move. It felt locked. Now, I chalked it up to, I injured it while I was exercising. Because I had been an athlete as a child, and growing up in high school and all that stuff, and I figured it didn't go away within 3 months.
Oh, you waited 3 months before it didn't go. Did you go to the doctor?
Oh, we'll get there. So it didn't get better, but it didn't get worse within 3 months. And I am part of why I was always successful at work was I was stubborn, right? It was one of those ideas of, I was very, very, I don't want to say set in my ways, but if I could see a way that would be successful, that was the way that it was going to go.
Mm-hmm.
And again, back in the early 2000s, the late 90s, that was rewarded. That's what success looked like. But by the end of the 2000s, that wasn't the case anymore. It wasn't just that anymore. You had to be able to do that, plus be what at that time was being coined as a team player.
Yeah,
and I always thought that I knew what it meant to be a team player because I was an athlete, and being a team player meant know your role and do your role. And do it as well as you can. But that aside, let's fast forward to 2014, and my arm still doesn't work.
From 2009 until 2014.
Yep. From 2009 to 2014, I'm at the point now where to get dressed, I have to grab my wrist with my right hand, lift my arm up. It would not move. I could wing it a little bit, but I couldn't lift it. It wouldn't move. And corporately and in my career, while I was still receiving, accolades, still getting raises, I shifted to 2 different companies with nice titles. My arm was getting worse as we were going along. And the answer to your question, did I ever see a doctor? No, because I'm stubborn.
Did it hurt?
No, it never hurt. It just wouldn't move. Like, if I tried to force it to move, I could feel some pain, but I just said, well, don't force it to move. Don't do that.
And you're still married to your wife, so she put up with this too.
Well, yeah, I mean, she put up with it, but it wasn't like I was complaining about it. I just accepted it as part of what was now happening. So I didn't say I was smart about it, but that is what it was. And so what wound up happening was, as I mentioned earlier, I went through that program, the program with the coach, and halfway through. So what happened was, at the very beginning of the program, I got elected to be the team lead that was moving the organization, this group of folks through this program. And I didn't know it at the time. But what that meant was I had to become the guy who developed the program. My job was to coach these 30 executives, and I had to learn how to do it. And I had to learn how to do it his way. I could no longer do it my way.
Ooh.
Which meant I had to give up everything that I knew. And it also meant that I had to give up, and I had to start ripping apart and ripping down those masks that I had on myself. And what wound up happening is we went through an exercise, and it was a limiting belief exercise. What beliefs are you holding on to? Which ones will you gain if you want to move forward? What benefit comes of it? A pain pleasure exercise. And I faked it because I was not going to be honest about it. I would be somewhat honest about it. But what happened is after I did it, my job was to coach others the next day and become part of and help others through it. So I did that, and it was a very different experience. And so I went home that night, and I was living away from my family, and I started to take a walk. And as I was taking the walk, the ability to hide those things, how I viewed myself, those 3 limiting beliefs that were holding me back, was no longer capable. I was no longer capable of doing it. I went through the whole experience. I came back to the house. I wrote them down. I looked at them. I got angry at them. I was mad. I was all kinds of things.
They were?
So yeah, so they were I am alone, they were I'm not worthy, and they are I'm unloved. Now, even
And
though I had a wife and a family and kids, it didn't matter. These were the things that I was holding on to motivate me to do well in life. Like these were the three things that I was using to motivate myself to move forward, because I could use those as things to well up, passion and energy and all that stuff, and get things out. But that's what was coming out when I was doing my things, right? This is how I was seeing myself. And the more things I tried to do, the more that was trying to come out. But the more I tried to keep it down, and left shoulder over time worked less and less and less and less. And so I did the exercise for real. I went to bed. I woke up the next morning and my left arm was fully functional.
wow.
And so I went in and talked to the coach, and I said, and again, you have to remember, I wasn't a believer then. Like I was like I said, I faked the first thing, and I wasn't really buying into the whole thing, because I thought there's no way this is how success looks.
Did you think it was related? Did you put the two and two together? Like
Immediately, immediately in the morning. And so I went in and I looked at him, and he was sitting in a room, and he looked at me, and I asked him, straight out, the exact words were, "What the hell did you do to me?" And he started laughing, and he said, "Have a seat." And we talked about it. And we talked about this concept of, the masks that you have, the beliefs that you hold on to. The longer you hold on to them, the more negative they are, the more they manifest themselves physically. And once you start to release those things, you're able to actually start to release some of those physical manifestations. And from that point forward, I learned how to tell when I was putting on masks, because more times than not, I was suffering some type of minor illness, some type of minor injury. And when I would come clean with myself about what was going on, very quickly, those minor illnesses, minor injuries would immediately go away. And
that
so,
is really interesting.
and so that's why I bought in. I mean, I was converted not because I had to become a believer, because it happened. And so once it happens to you and you understand it, you want to share it. So that's the story of the arm, and how I started to change, and to the point earlier, throughout the entire life of up and downs, you're always trying to figure out where you are on there, so that you don't end up with another locked arm.
Yeah. Wow. It just makes me, when I was working my last job, my left hip started to hurt so bad I could hardly walk. And I chalked it up to I was traveling a lot, sitting on airplanes, but I think also it had to do with, some of the things that you just talked about with me. I was getting to that point where I want to be a different person. Like people are saying that, the stress was just getting to me, and I wasn't who I really wanted to be. And yeah, I had masks on, trying to please people, and I was pushing a lot of push energy, not in flow. And yeah, my hip hasn't bothered me since I've,
So what happens? And the only thing I would share about, I also had to change my relationship with money
yeah,
during this process. And the biggest change that I made with money, and is that I used to view money as something that I would go out and seek, right? So I was chasing money. And I don't want to say quickly, but as I was going through this process, one of the immediate flips that I realized that I needed to make was I needed to flip that relationship and accept that money was going to chase me. So in other words, if I was who I was, if I was who I was and I was doing what I was supposed to do, money would find me. I didn't have to keep finding it. I didn't have to keep trying to prove myself to earn it. I didn't have to go out and leave 3 states away. I didn't have to do that. I didn't have to keep chasing it. I could just be who I was, and money would find its way to me. And
did it work?
I will tell you that not only does it work, For me, not only did it work for me, it's one of the things that I do with most of my clients, because a lot of the folks I work with are executives, and they many times are in the same situation. And the pursuit of more, the constant pursuit of more, thinking that that's what you're supposed to be doing. When they step back and they start allowing it to find them, the amount of money that finds them is incredible. And I'll use the same example. So I talked about the woman I met in Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
What she was struggling with was getting funding for these projects. So she had all the people lined up. She had technologies lined up. She had people willing to do the work lined up, but she couldn't get funding. And we talked about it. And so when I was working with her, she had a view of how to get money. When she was able to flip it, she went from getting her chasing down, trying to get people interested, to now where she's receiving 6 to 10 calls a day with someone coming into her life, now indicating that he has up to $300 million worth of funds available to her if she can bring forward everything and start to put it forward. So she went from 6 months ago having an idea and people lined up, but she was chasing it, to flipping what her relationship with money, to where now millions and hundreds of millions of dollars of coming to her saying, this money needs you.
Wow.
And so it absolutely works. It absolutely works.
Are there any tips for how to do that you want to share with the listeners before we wrap up?
So I mean, the biggest tip I would give, and it's one of those situations where it really does come down to letting go of a belief. Money, we all realize money is part of how this world goes round. Right. It's how it's a fact of life. It's here. But when you realize that it's only, and this is a belief that you wind up taking on. So it's you either will accept it or you won't. You've got to work through, are you willing to accept it and take little steps to do this? But recognize that money has no value if we don't exist. A dollar sitting on the floor has no value in and of itself. It doesn't have value until I pick it up and use it to do something with it. And so the biggest thing that I always work when I'm working with folks, the very first thing when it comes to this is to, number one, be very honest about how you view money and what your relationship is with it. Because if you are a seeker of it, you continue to seek it, it will be scarce. You'll be the one looking for it, and it's going to be on you to find it. So the first step is understand what your purpose is, aligned to that. Look to change your relationship with how money works and its purpose, and then consider adopting the idea that if you're living your purpose and you're doing this and you've changed your relationship with money, be aware of the opportunities that come and be open for them, because they come very fast. And sometimes they're very subtle. And I'll use as an example, if there's anybody who's watching this podcast right now, who on January 1st of last year had $100 of disposable income in their pocket, in August of last year, that $100 could have been worth $88 million.
If we saw an opportunity that you're going to say, okay.
If you were willing, so this is where it comes down to is, number one, do you see the opportunity? And if there's anyone who knows what I'm talking about, please go ahead and put it in chat, because most people would have stayed away from this opportunity, like completely abhorred this opportunity. And if you follow the idea of, wait a minute, this is an opportunity for me to take, and I'm going to step into something that maybe I'm not normally going to step into. Close. I apologize. You told me not to look over there,
Bitcoin.
But it's close.
Yeah, fine. Bitcoin. Yeah. Bitcoin's close. Cryptocurrency.
It's close. Yep. It was the Shiba Inu cryptocurrency. If you would have had $100 in that, if you would have bought $100 of Shiba Inu cryptocurrency in January of 2021, by August of 2021, that $100 would have turned into, I believe it was like $88 million. But Shiba Inu, if there was anybody out there, it was a joke. Cryptocurrency is scary.
How do you know?
So how do you know?
Yeah.
So for me,
an opportunity to take.
So again, for me, I'll admit I didn't take that, even though
you don't have ED.
No, I don't. But but I didn't take the opportunity, even though it was put in front of me at least 15 times.
Mm.
And so here's what I wound up doing is every time the opportunity was put in front of me, I consciously rejected it for what I believe to be rational reasons. Instead of saying, wait a minute, this has shown up at least twice as an opportunity, and accepting and asking myself, well, what risk am I really willing to take? What risk am I comfortable willing to take this chance?
It was $100, right?
It's $100. Let's put it this way: if you had $2, it would have been worth $1 million. All you had to do was put like $2 in, you would have had $1 million. I think it was like 225 or something like that. So the point is too many times when we look at things, we view it as an all or nothing sum, like it's an all or nothing game. We don't ask ourselves how much of what I have am I willing to put in, that I'm comfortable putting in to take this opportunity, to take this chance. And so as you go through life, you will have these opportunities put in front of you that you may naturally immediately say no. Right? You have a visceral reaction. When you have that, stop and step back and ask yourself, why are you saying no? And more times than not, if it is out of fear, ask yourself, what level of risk are you willing to take? What level of chance are you willing to take? Maybe it's not way up here. Maybe you're not comfortable buying, Bitcoin at $100,000, but maybe you are willing to put in $5 into something brand new and take that
Yeah.
chance. So that would be, so ask yourself that, and then take a measured risk, take a measured step forward, especially if you keep telling yourself hard no to something and the no is out of fear.
Well, what if you think that it's a dog? Like Kara said, she thought Shiba was a dog.
It is. So that's it. It is a dog. It is a dog. But if any, I mean, again, I go back to, it was when it came out, it was viewed as a joke. The creator actually said, this is a joke. Don't invest in this. Don't put your money in me. Don't do it. But it seemed like every other day, if you did watched any news streaming service on the internet, this coin was always being talked about. At least it was in mine for some reason.
Yeah. Well,
And I ignored it. I ignored it. And then, I sit where I sit today without all that money. But but I also have to tell myself, the other thing to tell yourself is it's okay. There's a reason I didn't do it, and I'm here where I am now. So what do I take from it? What opportunity do I take? And maybe if I would have taken that money, I would not be doing what I'm doing now to bring these communities forward. I would have gotten fat and lazy and done, the things that I wasn't supposed to do. So really, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So, don't dwell on it, but be aware of those opportunities.
be aware. Kara says here too, she says, oh, wow, yes, your relationship with money was like your core belief of I'm not worthy. So I'm going to make sure I chase it so I can get it because I'm not worth it coming to me or making it happen organically. Mm-hmm. How does that resonate? Yeah.
So it's all tied, right? Yeah. So if you have that core belief that you're undeserving, yes, you are going to go out and do the things and bring the things to you that you get to hold up as an external thing that says, see, I'm worthy. And you tell yourself, look, I'm worthy. I've got 2 cars. I've got a house. I've got this. I've got that. I've got, the latest and greatest, watch, whatever it is. You try to kid yourself that that's what made, look, I have worth now because I have this thing. And, once you realize that it's you and you go, no, wait a minute, I just as an individual am worthy. All of a sudden, those things start to find their way to you.
What a way to end. That's awesome. Oh, let me put up, I've got here some how to reach you. So tell us who your target audience is too, your target client.
So I'm not one of those coaches that have like that little niche that says, I try to find this specific person. What I'm really trying, the people that I work with are those folks who are looking, who know that their current situation isn't their end purpose. So I try to work with people who are trying to find themselves and align that self to a bigger purpose so that they can go ahead and move themselves to the next level of success and fulfillment within themselves. So It can be students, and I work with students for free. I do quite a bit of volunteer work with kids, 20 and under, because they need this just as much as anybody else. But it can be anyone. Right now it's a lot of executives, because the COVID's made them step back and say, there's got to be more to this than what I'm doing. But I've worked with, I've worked with teachers, I've worked with, housewives. It doesn't matter. It's really just about people who want to elevate where they are, and connect and do more with their time here.
Got it. So people can reach you at your email, which I'll put in the show notes for people who are listening to this as a podcast. So I've got it up here. And then they can also visit your website, awakenedexplorations.com. And then you have a Facebook page. Is that it? Yeah, Facebook page.
Yep, that'll work. Yep.
Yeah, Awakened Explorations. And we talked about this before. You said, yeah, put my cell phone number up there so you can you can also call or text Brian. And so lots of ways to reach him. Well, you shared so much. I learned from every one of my guests, and I really appreciate you being on the show tonight, Brian. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. I enjoyed being here. Thank you.
Yeah. And thanks to everybody who joined in the chat and commented on this. I really appreciate you guys showing up for this show and showing up every night. Every night I go live. So I'm going live again next Wednesday night, 7:30. I hope to see you here. And I'll be scheduling that episode tomorrow. And so you'll be able to see who the guest is and everything. So thank you guys. I'm going to put you in the green room and just play my outro video. So thank you so much. I appreciate you guys. I really do.
Onward Live is sponsored by Emily Harmon Coaching and Consulting. Visit my website, emilyharmon.com, to learn more about me and my coaching programs. I'd love to help you create a life you love living. Remember, every adversity is our own personal university. Sometimes the lessons are difficult, and we must learn from our experiences. Vulnerability is your superpower. You are lovable and worthy. And we discuss these topics and more because professional is personal. Thank you for joining us and engaging with me and my guest. I look forward to seeing you next time.